The person who's calling from phone number ending in 1148, can you please unmute yourself and identify yourself? You have to press *6 to unmute, and then if you can tell us your name.
Hi, this is Commissioner Cox.
Oh, okay, Commissioner Cox. So I will just leave you with the ability to talk, and you can just unmute yourself by pressing *6.
Okay, so if I do *6 now, I will mute, and then when I unmute, I do *6 again.
Yes, please. You can test right now.
Let me do that.
Yep, you're muted, and then *6, you'll be unmuted.
Okie-doke. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's 12:45, so we'll start the meeting. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks. Today's Thursday, September 3rd. This is a virtual meeting of the Commission. Let me start with a roll call. Commissioners, when I call your name, please reply here or present, and please confirm that you can hear me and see me. Commissioner Wong.
Here, and I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Burns.
Here, I can see you and hear you.
Commissioner Hughes.
Present, I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Here, I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Yekovich.
President, I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Osman.
I can see and hear you.
Commissioner Cox.
Yes, I can see and hear you.
We have and Chairman Leon, and we have a quorum. Earlier this year, Governor Pritzker signed Public Act 101-0640, making certain amendments to the Open Meetings Act so that we, along with other boards and commissions, can continue to host virtual meetings during this COVID-19 public health emergency, provided that certain conditions are met. One of those conditions is that I, as head of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, determined that an in-person meeting of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks is not practical or prudent. I want to make sure our virtual meeting meets all the conditions of the Open Meetings Act as amended. Therefore, I'm making a determination pursuant to Section 7E2 of the Open Meetings Act that an in-person meeting of this Commission on Chicago Landmark is not practical or prudent. Similarly, I'm also making a determination pursuant to Section 7E5 that because of the disaster, as declared by the governor, it is unfeasible for at least one member of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks or its chief administrative officer or its legal officer to be physically present at the meeting place, inasmuch as there is no physical meeting place at this time. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks on June 4th, 2020, regarding the chairman's emergency rule-making powers, I issued emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public commission meetings and provisions for remote public participation effective June 23rd, 2020. And this is in response to the COVID-19 emergency. These rules were posted on the Commission's website. In line with these emergency rules, today's regular Commission meeting is a virtual meeting being simulcast to the general public via live stream. Commission meetings have been held virtually since May of this year. Meetings are structured to minimize the chances for technical difficulties. Members of the general public have been encouraged to submit written statements in advance of the meeting, and these have been posted on the Commission's website. Letters and emails of support for Agenda Item 2, the preliminary landmark designation of the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House, were received from Brian Clark Green, Chair of the Heritage Conservation Committee on behalf of the Society of Architectural Historians, Jeanette Taylor, Older Women of the 20th War, Elizabeth Blasius, Tony Preckwinkle, Cook County Board President, Pauline Saliga, Executive Director of the Society of Architectural Historians, Mikhail Safar, President on behalf of the Hyde Park Historical Society, Ward Miller, Executive Director on behalf of Preservation Chicago, William Eager, Senior Vice President on behalf of Preservation of Affordable Housing Chicago, Mike Medina, Anita Delaria, and Julie Whitted. In addition, a letter of support was received from Ward Miller, Executive Director on behalf of Preservation Chicago for Agenda Item 3, the preliminary landmark destination of the Illinois Bell buildings. Members of the public desiring to speak at today's meeting were required to register before the meeting, and verbal statements by the public for all agenda items will take place at the beginning of the meeting. Applicants and their representatives, as well as aldermen, were asked to contact staff if they desire to speak, and they will be able to do so after the staff presentation on a specific project. 3 members of the general public have signed up to speak and were provided instructions regarding how to do so. I would like to call upon these people now. 3 people have signed up to speak on agenda number 2, the preliminary destination of the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House. And one of those people also signed up to speak on agenda 3, the preliminary destination of the Illinois Bell building. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. First, let us hear from those wishing to speak on agenda number 2. May I hear from Ms. Safar, please? Or Safar, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Yes, it's Safar. Thank you very much. I simply want to express publicly the support for this landmark recommendation by the Hyde Park Historical Society. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we hear now from Jonathan Solomon?
Yes, thank you. I have a brief letter that I'll read to the commission. I'll keep it under 3 minutes. My name is Jonathan Solomon. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, an architect licensed to practice by the state of Illinois, and an associate professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I am also a member of the Chicago chapter of the American Institute of Architects. I had the honor of volunteering on the team from Preservation Chicago that helped prepare documentation for the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House. And I'm speaking today to urge you to approve landmark status for this locally and nationally significant site. Sites of importance to the Black experience are underrepresented in registered landmarks nationally and in Chicago. Landmark status for the Till home is an important step to addressing this disparity, but I hope it is also an opportunity to examine the structural reasons the disparity exists. A majority of the 7 criteria for determining a Chicago landmark rely on architectural expertise. Those are criteria's important architecture, important architect, distinctive theme as a district, and unique visual feature. Because architectural expertise has and continues to structurally exclude Black voices. See recent articles in Architectural Record, which states that only 2% of licensed architects in the United States are Black, and in the New Yorker that only 1% of preservationists are Black. These criteria skew the determination of Chicago landmarks away from the Black experience. The Chicago Historic Resources Survey, completed in 1995, was researched by a team that did not include Black architects or Black preservationists. The City of Chicago's landmarks website lists architects, but includes no Black architects. While its list of styles includes none originating in or affiliated directly with the Black experience in Chicago, it does include such obviously problematic citations as the, quote, Oriental style. No tool is perfect, and I'm gratified that the flexibility of the landmark criteria have allowed for a strong nomination to be made for the Till House. I teach at the University of Chicago and at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and in the classroom, I ask my students to remain aware of the bias embedded in their tools. I hope that the commission will continue to do likewise in its work. I encourage the commission to approve landmark status for the Till House and to continue to explore ways that your tools, including the landmark criteria and the survey, can be best inclusive of sites that, like the Till House, have been too long overlooked by architectural expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. May I hear from Lisa DiChiera?
Hello,
Hello.
commissioners. Nice to see you. Landmarks Illinois is very much in favor of this proposed preliminary designation. As Jonathan already explained, it's critically important to protect buildings that tell important stories that are not just recognized for their architecture. And along with the already landmarked Roberts Temple, designating this home will further the important story and recognition of Emmett Till and protect the home that can continue to tell that story. I'm very happy to see the Commission on Chicago Landmarks consider this building. And we also want to really encourage that other buildings that are important for their social history, the important stories that they tell, often uncomfortable stories, be pre-identified, not only by organizations like Landmarks Illinois and Preservation Chicago and many others who have been involved with this effort, but to pre-identify them because, as we know, they're not included, mostly not included in the Chicago Historic Resources Survey. So these buildings are always unprotected until often there is a last minute threat. So I really commend Preservation Chicago and the Hyde Park Historical Society and Blacks in Green for proactively pursuing landmark designation for this building. And I really want all of us to work hard to continue to look at buildings that also are important to tell social history stories. We at Landmarks Illinois are pursuing, as you know, an individual landmark designation for the Muddy Waters home. We're also exploring places important to the history of the Black Panther Party and its legacy in the city. And again, these are all places that we should work together to look to really make sure that we don't lose them unexpectedly. And so again, thank you to the commission and thank you to everyone involved with this effort. We really hope that you will consider this, this preliminary designation.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, that's it for people who wanted to testify. Let's move to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. And remember that please raise your hand whether you move or second, and then I will have to call the names of each individual commissioner. You need to say yes, no, or abstain. Commission?
Chairman, sorry, this is tech support.
Yeah.
Lisa was signed up for CCL3 also. Does she go now or is she done?
I'm sorry, who?
Miss Lisa DiChiera, the last.
Yeah, she's the one who just, for item number 3. Yes, I'm sorry. Lisa, would you like to speak on item number 3, please? My mistake.
Sure, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, again, really excited to see this preliminary landmark designation for the Illinois Bell building, built in 1966, which, as far as I can see, is probably going to be one of the youngest buildings landmarked if the commission does approve this preliminary designation. So Landmarks Illinois has long been promoting the need to continue to identify and protect important buildings of the recent past. This building, like so many others, built in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and into the 70s, as we know, again, do not have the benefit of being in the Chicago Historic Resources Survey because of their younger age, and can often fall through the cracks with any type of last minute threat. We don't have the benefit of the 90-day demo delay with buildings like this. So thankfully, due to the important financial incentive of the Class L, we have a building like this coming forward for landmark designation. And it is such an important building. I'm so pleased to see not only a building of the new formalist style, but again, of this era that really reflects an important period of the city's growth in the 1960s when so many companies were fleeing to the suburbs. The city had a very concerned effort to make sure that corporations had the opportunity to still build their headquarters in downtown Chicago in the Loop, and really encouraging exciting architecture. And so again, this is really something that I think as a department, the Department of Planning and Development, we need to all continue to think about ways to update that survey so that buildings like this can continue to be identified and really thought about which ones deserve protection. So I thank, many thanks to the team that's pursuing rehabilitation of this building, along with the use of Class L, which Landmarks Illinois supports. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we'll move to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Again, make sure that you raise your hand. I will recognize you, and then I will call everybody's name to affirm the vote, or if you don't affirm it, please say so. The minutes were circulated. The minutes of the meeting of August 6th were circulated to the commissioners. Do I have a motion to approve them?
Approved.
Approved by Commissioner Osmond. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tolliver, and let me do the roll call. Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes, I already did.
Yes, sorry. Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Cox. Yes, I hear that you're saying yes. Okay. I didn't miss anybody, I believe. Okay, so the motion is approved. I affirm it as chairman. The next item is the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House located at 6427 South St. Lawrence Avenue on the 20th Ward, and Matt Crawford will make the presentation on behalf of the department. Is it Matt or Joyce? Matt, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So Commissioners, today is September 3rd, marks the 65th anniversary of the 4-day funeral for Emmett Till, a 14-year-old Chicago teen lynched in 1955 in Mississippi. The tragic murder became a symbol of the brutality of racism in America. Tens of thousands of people attended the funeral at Robert's Temple at 4021 South State Street, shown here. Photos of Till's mutilated body, published around the world, roused the civil rights movement in America. So on the occasion of this anniversary, I'm here today with a preliminary recommendation for the designation of the home of Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley. This recommendation is timely, not only for the anniversary today, but also for the current reckoning with racism in America. And I would not be here today before you at this right time without Mary Lou Seidel of Preservation Chicago, Jonathan Solomon, Associate Professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, Naomi Davis of Blacks in Green, and the Hyde Park Historical Society, who have all prepared and helped push forward this landmark designation report that's before you. Emmett and his mother lived on the second floor of this brick 2 flat in Woodlawn. It was from this house that Emmett left to board a train with his great uncle and cousins to visit relatives in Mississippi. It was the last time Mrs. Mobley would see her son. The home is located at 64th and South St. Lawrence Avenue in the Woodland community area in the 20th Ward. The West Woodland neighborhood was a hub for African Americans during the Great Migration from the South. Staff believes that the building meets 2 criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criterion 1 for heritage, where its role as the home of a child and mother and their tragic story become a catalyst for the civil rights movement in America. The building also meets criterion 3 for its association with Emmett Till and Navy Till Mobley, two people whose story was catapulted internationally following Emmett's murder. Leaders, poets, authors, politicians, influencers have testified for the past 65 years how the Emmett Till story has impacted their lives, fueled their work, and reminded them of the importance of continuing the work for equity and justice. Emmett Till was born in 1941 at Cook County Hospital. His father, Louis Till, separated from his mother shortly after Emmett's birth. Emmett and his mom would live in Summit, Illinois, and then Detroit, before settling into the apartment in Woodlawn in 1951. Mrs. Mobley remained in the home until 1962, when she moved to Chatham. In the summer of 1955, Emmett's great uncle from Mississippi invited Emmett and his cousins in Chicago down south for a visit with family. Emmett, with his great uncle and cousins, boarded the City of New Orleans train to the small town of Webb, Mississippi. On August 24th, Emmett and several of his cousins visited the small store in Money, Mississippi, owned by a Roy Bryant. Bryant was out of town on business, and the store was being run that day by his young wife, Carolyn. Accounts of what happened during Emmett's visit to the store differ, but it got around to Bryant that Emmett had a verbal interaction with his wife, an act that, in the Jim Crow South, could mean lynching for a black man or a black teen. 3 days later, Bryant's husband Roy and his half-brother J.W. Milam kidnapped, tortured, and shot Till. They tied Till's body to this cotton gin wheel and tossed it into the Tallahatchie River. The body was discovered 3 days later. Despite opposition from Mississippi authorities, Mrs. Till had her son's body returned to Chicago for a funeral and burial. She took the profoundly extraordinary step to display her son in an open coffin during the funeral at Robert's Temple. Pictures of Emmett's battered body were published in Jet magazine. The image became a symbol, a galvanizing symbol to African Americans to demand political and social change. Soon after the funeral, Mrs. Bradley traveled to Mississippi to attend the trial of her son's murderers. After 1 hour of deliberation, the white jury acquitted the two men. They later confessed to the murder in a magazine article. Emmett's killing and the acquittal of his murderers motivated African Americans to demand justice. 3 months after the trial, Rosa Parks, thinking of the Till murder, refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery City bus and was arrested. Soon after that, a new, relatively young minister, Martin Luther King Jr., called for a citywide bus boycott. The civil rights movement in the post-war era was born. Mrs. Mobley gave speeches to overflowing crowds across the country after losing her son. For more than 4 decades, she spoke out about racial injustice, worked to bring her son's killers to justice, and help children living in poverty. She taught at Chicago Public Schools for 23 years, and she died in 2003 at age 81. In addition to the landmark criteria discussed, the home clearly meets the integrity criterion. The only 2 alterations to the exterior are a wooden front porch and glass block windows in the basement. So in conclusion, I want to again thank the authors of this report. The Till House is located in the 24th Ward, and Alderman Jeanette Taylor supports the designation. As you know, we've also received letters of support from the Hyde Park Historical Society, the Society of Architectural Historians, and the Preservation of Affordable Housing. Staff recommends that the significant historical and architectural features of the building be preliminarily identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the home. And you have a preliminary landmark recommendation to that effect before you. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I believe Mary Lou Seidel from Preservation Chicago is also available. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Mary Lou, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, if that's okay.
Yes.
I have Mary Lou Seidel, Director of Community Engagement at Preservation Chicago. I want to thank the Historic Preservation Division staff, the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, and Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor for bringing forward this nomination for the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House at 6427 South St. Lawrence. I especially want to thank Matt Crawford, who did an amazing job helping us through this, preparing this report and the PowerPoint presentation. I would like to extend special thanks to Jonathan Solomon, who co-authored the nomination, and for Preservation Chicago and its incredible team who advocate and act to protect important historic preservation efforts like this one. We are grateful as well for the Hyde Park Historical Society for their support throughout this process. And finally, I want to thank Naomi Davis with Blacks in Green for their work lifting up the history of the West Woodlawn neighborhood, and especially for their support of this landmark designation. For the last 9 months, I've been researching the history of Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley. It is a story that has made me weep, made me angry, and then ultimately inspired me. I was grateful for the chance to learn more about Emmett Till's short life, his love of baseball and a good joke, how he helped people around his Woodlawn neighborhood, and how he helped his single mother take care of business around the house. I have been especially honored to meet Emmett Till's cousins and learn more about what they are doing to keep their legacy alive. Instead of writing my own statement this afternoon, I would like to read 2 brief statements that were sent to me by Emmett's cousins. They were unable to attend here today, but they asked that I read these on their behalf. From Ollie Gordon, I am Emmett Till's cousin, and I lived with Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley in their apartment on the 2nd floor at 6427 South St. Lawrence when my family first migrated here from Mississippi. Later, my family moved into the garden apartment in the same building. My daughter, Erica Gordon Taylor, was practically raised by Miss Till Mobley. Erica carried on the important work of fighting for equity and justice in the name of Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley. She worked tirelessly to see the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act passed in Congress until her passing in March of 2020. The final home of Emmett Till at 6427 South St. Lawrence Avenue should and must be a Chicago landmark. Why? Because it was the beginning of the end of the journey that Emmett faced. He left that location to meet his tragic death, and his death was the springboard for the civil rights movement. If people travel to this site, they can imagine a 14-year-old boy playing and enjoying life. Emmett Till's legacy will always be visible, and his spirit can be felt when visiting this place. This home represents a tangible piece of important American history, and it's important to keep Emmett Till's and Mamie Till Mobley's stories alive through this place. And from the Reverend Wheeler Parker Jr., who took the trip with his cousin Emmett Till to Mississippi in 1955, I am grateful for the efforts to preserve the memory of my cousin Emmett Till. He speaks from the grave. 65 years ago, he was brutally murdered, and no one has paid for it. Justice can have many faces, and the preserving the home of Emmett Till is a face of justice. He deserves to be remembered in this positive way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward Miller, would you like to speak on this?
Yes. Can you hear me, commissioners?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Ward Miller. I'm Executive Director of Preservation Chicago, and you have a statement on file from us. And we wholeheartedly support the consideration of the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House in Chicago's West Woodlawn community as a designated Chicago landmark. We recognize the importance of this building, located at 6427 South St. Lawrence Avenue, as the home of Emmett Till and his family. His mother and Emmett lived on the 2nd floor with his aunts and uncles on the 1st floor, and extended family and cousins in the garden level or the basement of the building. But this was truly a family-oriented house in every regard. The house is a direct connection to the life of Emmett Till in Chicago, a child, a person who walked to the nearby McCosh Elementary School, now renamed in his honor. And he is known for his acts of kindness, helping elderly neighbors, and was well liked in the community. Emmett Till's visit to Money, Mississippi to spend time with his extended family resulted in a tragic and almost unimaginable series of events, which are still difficult to comprehend even 65 years later. The tragedy of those frightful days have been well documented and part of history, so that we should never forget the murder of a young teenage child of 14 years of age from Chicago, caught in a world and a nation of double standards and injustice. Today's meeting of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, September 3rd, marks the 65th anniversary of the beginnings of Emmett Till's visitation and funeral, held in part at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ on Chicago's South Side, a place where tens of thousands of mourners, some estimated to be placed at 100,000 individuals, gathered to pay the respects to Emmett's mother and family, and to bear witness by an open casket visitation of such a heinous crime. It is almost provident that we are here today on the 65th anniversary to encourage and support the Chicago landmark designation of his beloved Chicago home. Emmett Till's death impacted a community and a nation and sparked, in many aspects, portions of the civil rights movement in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The dedication of his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, to share the story of her son's senseless death to the world inspired many, including Dr. King, Rosa Parks, and Congressman John Lewis, who we just lost, and others. Today, in a time of social unrest in our nation, Emmett Till's name is still relevant and heard among many peaceful protesters and on many placards. It's important, perhaps now more than ever, to protect the legacy of Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, and this house, their home, is a direct link to that life of Emmett and the work of his mother to make others more aware of injustices in our nation, in our world, and to further peace, equality, and healing. This building and its potential landmark designation is a great honor bestowed upon this home, which will help further this story while being a place of reflection and perhaps connecting us all in some way to a child that became caught up in a terrible nightmare of injustice, which fueled many changes in policies in the decades that followed. We therefore, without hesitation, recommend Chicago landmark designation of the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley home and house. Special thanks to the family of Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley, including their cousins Ollie Gordon and Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler Parker Jr., Alderman Jeanette Taylor, who's been outstanding in this effort, members and neighbors of the West Woodlawn community, including Naomi Davis of Blacks and Green, the Hyde Park Historical Society, including Michael Safer and Jack Spicer, William Eager, Senior Vice President of POA, Chicago, and Blake McCrate, owner of the property who has consented to designation. Also to Commissioner Cox, Deanna Cavallo, Matt Crawford, Candlin Hahn, and the whole department, the Department of Planning and Development, Historic Preservation Division. And a special thanks to Mary Lou Seidel of Preservation Chicago and Jonathan Solomon of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for their research and dedication to this project and the compilation of this preliminary landmarks designation report. We are grateful, and that is said with a heavy heart. On behalf of so many supporters across Chicago and extending far beyond our city, we thank you, the Commission, and the Department for your support and vote to support this preliminary Chicago landmark designation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, Ward, and Mary Lou. You know, after reading the report and reading more about this historical moment in the US, it is really hard to understand such a horrific act. Here at the Landmarks Commission, we typically concentrate on the architectural features of buildings. This is different, yet no less important than what we do on a regular basis. The historical importance of this event still reverberates today. As painful as this was for Emmett's family, and in particular his mother, we owe a ton of gratitude to his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, for her courage to have an open casket funeral. That decision showed the world the tragedy that the family suffered and elevated the importance of the civil rights movement, a movement that has never stopped and still continues today. Yes, the house itself may not have the architectural characteristic of a grandiose building, and it may look like other buildings in the neighborhood. Yet, it is important because of the history made by its residents. It was precedent setting and changed the way we view the world today. Designating Emmett Till's former home as a landmark is the least that we can do in order to make sure that we always remember the suffering of the Till family. Let this small recognition remind us that no human being deserves what Emmett Till endured. Not then, not now, not ever. Commissioners, comments, questions?
I have a comment. I'm trying to click on, but I'm not getting it.
Okay, go ahead, Reverend Tolliver.
I have had an occasion to visit the grocery store in Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till allegedly whistled at the Ms. Bryant. I was there on a tour led by civil rights activist Julian Bond, who at the time was serving as a professor of history at the University of Virginia, and led us on a tour of civil rights sites in the South. I've also visited the exhibition at the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., where Emmett Till's casket is featured. I had the uniform experience at both sites of breaking out into copious tears. I've shared that story with numerous friends who've been to the Washington, D.C. site, and we all say the same thing. We just had involuntary tears arise when we viewed it. I say all that to say, we've heard all the historical facts, which we know, but those sites are pilgrimage sites, which supersede all the facts we've heard, or the architectural excellence or not. Just looking at them on the part of people, especially African Americans, remind us of many thousands of others in the United States who suffered the same fate as Emmett Till. And so pilgrimage sites are meant to be places where people reflect and to then also be inspired to carry on whatever the meaning of that particular site conveys to them. This home will be join that pantheon of pilgrimage sites, regardless of architecture, that will serve as places of reflection and sources of inspiration for many people who are sensitive enough to understand what all of this means.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolliver. Commissioner Wong.
Thank you, Chairman Leon. I also want to echo Commissioner Tolliver's point about this home becoming a pilgrimage site. And it deeply affects me, as I've had numerous friends who've families have grown up in Mississippi and have told me that story of themselves visiting their relatives down in Mississippi, and the Emmett Till story resonates when their own mothers told them, "Don't do what Emmett Till did, and watch yourself." And it continues to resonate with me about how this still occurs to this day. One of the questions I had in regard to the building, and especially as this becomes a pilgrimage site, is who is currently occupying that building and the condition of which that building is, and whether there will be any type of endowment set aside to maintain the structure of this building, as it will continue to require that maintenance. So I'd like to put that, ask that question of either the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Wong. Commissioner Blake McCray is the current owner, and he will be testifying in a minute. So he will be testifying. Commissioner Hughes. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, sorry. Hi, everyone. I too would like to expand upon what Commissioner Tolliver was saying. I have family in Mississippi, and that is a very relevant site there still. And the stories still get told to us even when we go to visit. And I grew up in St. Louis, and this story is very prominent in our Black history books. This is not something that I needed to research or I needed to learn more about, because it's very ingrained in our minds and in our history. This is a monumental moment for the commission. I'm so proud of us. I definitely had to take a moment. Because this is so relevant to everything that's going on today. The hard conversations that we've been having following George Floyd. I'm very proud of us as a commission, because as I've preached from day one since I joined this board, we need to view properties on a case-by-case basis. We need to understand all of the context, not just the amazing architecture and architects, but actually understand the history, understand the significance of a property like the Emmett Till home. And I'm very proud that we're moving in that direction and that we are stepping up to the plate for properties like this, because like Ward said, it's so relevant. We absolutely have to preserve this history in this context for everyone. I recently just bought a home in Woodlawn, and that was not by accident. I chose this community for a reason, and there's so much history here. There's so much, like, this is a monumental moment for us, and I'm proud to be at this table with you guys. I'll wrap it up with that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cox. We can't hear you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Cox, you have to press *6 on your phone.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Thank you, fellow commissioners, for your heartfelt testament. And as I think Commissioner Hughes articulated, this is ingrained in African-American history and culture. We all are very, very familiar with the story. I will say, I don't think I knew where the house was, and that it was right there in Woodlawn, which speaks to a larger question. Did the person who purchased the house understood that with the purchase of that house, they were stepping into African American history, and that this could not be a fixer-upper or resale or anything that would be speculative, because in fact, it's a site of memory. It's a site of African American cultural memory, if it were a prominent, acclaimed figure, it would probably be a house museum today with a big fat endowment to take care of its long-term maintenance. And so, I don't know if the owner, the current owner, bought it with the intention of turning it into a house museum in honor of a seminal moment in civil rights history. So personally, I would like to hear from the owner, because if you didn't know the history, and if you were not willing to make it a pilgrimage site, a site of memory, then I think we are not out of the woods here relative to the act that we're taking. But let me be clear, I appreciate the fact that the current owner supports the historic designation. But then we need to talk about what is going to become of the property after that designation. Because as I said, if it were associated with an acclaimed figure, it wouldn't just be fixed up and resold for a residential use. That's the conversation that I would like to have as a commission. I know many, many cases, whether it's Rosa Parks' home in Detroit or Dr. Ocean Sweet's house in Detroit. All of these figures were important, and in those cases, an entity stepped forward. In the case of Dr. Sweet's home, the planning department wrote the grant to secure $500,000 so that his house could be turned into a pilgrimage site. So I'd like to know, after this designation is done, what's going to become of this home, what's going to become of the vacant lot next door to the home, and how are we going to celebrate the importance of this site as a site of memory in African American culture.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Yeah.
You have it.
Yeah, let me call on the current property owner, Mr. Blake McCray. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for having me on today. I'm totally grateful to hear everyone's feedback. And as the owner of the property, I am 100% on board on making it a landmark destination. I am very understand the importance and the significance of Emmett Till's life and what has transpired and what it can do, the significance to the community of Woodlawn. I have bought and sold and been a part of developing numerous houses in the Woodlawn or buildings in the Woodlawn area since 2012. And, to be honest, when I was brought this property a year ago, it was brought to me from a developer or an investor out of state, and he had bought it from someone else that had renovated it without permits and plans. And so the property was brought, I had no idea the significance of the building at the time when I purchased it. I bought it with the intent to restabilize the property and bring it up to the current codes, the city of Chicago. That was my original plan. And after the last 9 or 10 months, we weren't able to make great ground with permits and plans, and luckily saved by COVID, I guess that helped delay to bring us to this point that it hasn't been, the inside's still it's in decent condition, but they just, there's a tenant on the second floor. And obviously after what's come about, we are, I've taken a step back and realized like, hey, this is a much bigger, this is much bigger than a income producing property or buying and selling. And I'm willing to and wanting to meet with the members of the community organizations, and worked with Mary Lou, and she's been in contact. She was my first point of bringing this to my attention. So I guess what my intentions are is I'm regrouping on how we can turn this into something way bigger than just, you know, a income producing property.
Thank you. And I will encourage you to talk to the staff of the Landmarks Commission to see what resources are available to preserve and make the building more prominent. As you heard from the different commissioners, this may become a pilgrimage site, and we want to ensure that you have the resources to make sure that we preserve this building in the proper way. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. McCray? Commissioner Wong asked a question about the finance, about resources to improve the property and make sure that it remains a feasible landmark. And after that, we'll go to Commissioner. I don't know whether Matt could answer that question, and then we could add Commissioner Cox and Commissioner Hughes. Raise your hand. Let me ask Commissioner Cox from the Department of Planning and Development, what resources may be available to enhance the landmark status of this building?
Well, I mean, I know that, am I unmuted?
No, you're fine. You're fine. We hear you.
I would have to defer to Deanna about whether Adopt a Landmark could apply to this project. Maybe we should just let her answer that, and then I'll continue, because the resources that I know are national resources that have to do with African American cultural sites that are available. But locally, I want to make sure that I'm speaking correctly. So Deanna, if you could speak to that, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, commissioners. This property as a Chicago landmark would absolutely qualify for Adopt a Landmark funds.
Okay.
So I think that's very helpful. I think the larger question, quite frankly, is, what are what would the owner like to do? Because I don't think he bought it thinking that he was buying a house museum or all of the infrastructure that we know that it takes for that kind of reuse. So, is it, fully restored and rehabbed rental property with a plaque or some kind of commemorative marker outside, or is it the headquarters of a nonprofit that does something with social justice, and it has an interior commemorative exhibit? There are many things that this could be, but it does require it's going to require hours and hours and a sense of mission on the part of the owner. And I just don't have a good sense of what he's signed up for. So I would be interested in that. As I said, house museums, having visited a number of them, I think you all know, they can be very resource intensive, because this is a pilgrimage site for a small sector of the population. But I have seen other cases where there's a rental property above the first floor is the headquarters of a nonprofit that runs their operations out of that and is committed to keeping it open to the general public for a targeted exhibit. So there are many scenarios for how this could be a win-win, but it does require a partnership with the current property owner. And obviously, I'm interested, and our staff would certainly be interested in thinking a little bit outside of the box to stand up something that I think we would all be proud of in the city of Chicago.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before Mr. McRae, before you answer that question, there are other commissioners who want to ask questions and they may have other ideas. So let's hear from them as well as the aldermen, and then we'll give you the platforms for you to speak and answer the questions regarding your plans. Commissioner Hughes.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. I think we're kind of dancing around the concern here. My concern is if the owner decides to retain the property and does all of the, does everything that it takes to become a house museum, then what's going to happen, 50 years from now, 30 years from now? Has it been considered that this property should probably go to an organization or a group that would be able to maintain it throughout time, rather than one owner in partnership? Or I know the Farnsworth House is coming to mind right now. The owner of that property ended up gifting it to the organization that maintains it today. I'm sure this happens a lot, but has the owner considered gifting the home to a group that would be willing to maintain it and keep up with it? I know there's other questions from commissioners, so.
Right, so that's one question that we'll put to the owner. Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things. One is Mr. McCreate, I really appreciated you saying in thinking about the building, that you want to talk to the community and find out the community's interest, because that's an important thing to balance with the history and the national interest, to make sure that those things are complementary and that one brings out the best in the other. So I think starting from that perspective is terribly important. I wanted to suggest the opportunity of the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Legacy Fund and team. So they have a team of technical assistance providers, and also what I understand is some financial resources. They have a number of sites that they're working with now in Chicago, and this would be a great opportunity to initiate a conversation with them. I want to thank Commissioner Hughes for your use of the word monumental. This is a modest home that is monumentally important. And I appreciate the recognition of that. And then just one more comment, which is to thank the Till and the Till Mobley family, certainly Mary Lou and Jonathan, the alderman, Naomi, my friend, hello, and so many others for the honor and the privilege that you brought to us as a commission to help advance this monumentally important site. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Taylor, you're next, but if I could ask you to hold off for a second while we hear from Reverend Tolliver, Commissioner Tolliver, and then we'll get back to you.
I was just going to say, this is not something we can solve today. We're turning ourselves into a committee of the whole. But additionally, I was going to point out, nearby you have the DuSable Museum of African American History, which already commemorates Emmett Till. So any conversation would have to happen also with that standing museum whose purpose is to commemorate things like this. Duplication would not do, but as Commissioner Cox has already said, there are a variety of models. There are plaques, we can't solve this today, but this house is in walking distance to the DuSable Museum. So you can't talk about this in absence of looking at their mission and what they are also doing. Can't support two sites for the same theme.
Thank you. Let me call on Commissioner, on Alderman Taylor. Good afternoon.
Commissioner, good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you all for coming to the table around the Emmett Till home. too often in Black communities, we don't get to say things that are important to us that tell our history and that also celebrate our culture. And so this is important, but for more importantly, for me, I wanted to make sure that the family is involved. What I don't think you all know, that too often Emmett Till's image is used without any conversation ever with their family. And so I didn't know if this home was something they wanted to preserve or this was something they wanted to see knocked down, because we definitely don't know. Because we never really bothered to ask, because it's history to us doesn't mean it may be history to that family. But that being said, I have met with the family and talked to them, and they're very excited to be a part of this project, and they're absolutely grateful that the house will be preserved. To Mr. Blake, if I'm not mistaken, I came into the process because Blacks in Green, who is an organization in our community, wants to turn it into a museum that shows off the things that have happened in our community, because the Emmett Till home is not the only piece of history that's in Woodlawn. That's just one of the smallest pieces. And so there is an offer already on the table, Mr. Blake, if I'm not mistaken, from Blacks and Greens, along with other organizations that are staked right in the community who want to make sure that they're there to preserve it. And if you know anything about Blacks and Greens and Naomi talks about a walkable village in our own neighborhood, something that's owned by the community, some places that you can walk to. So walking to eat, walking to read, walking to learn, walking to work is what she talks about in Blacks and Greens. And so there is already conversation about them purchasing it and turning it into something the community actually wants to see. What I don't want us to lose sight of is that it's 65 years later and we're still facing the same injustices we faced when Emmett Till's murderers were not brought to justice. That family is still seeking justice today. And here it is in 2020, we got things like George Floyd happening. So I'm gratefully excited that the commission is going to take on this, but I also want the commission to look at other places in our community that need to be preserved, because too often it's like it's too expensive. We can't afford, can't do that, but we figure it out for other spaces, which is why it was so important that I made sure as an organizer, you put all the pieces together and make sure that it just fits. The DuSable Museum is definitely not left out of this conversation. And if you know anything about Dr. Irma definitely is about preserving what happens in and around our community. And so that's another conversation that we just need to have. But what I want the commission to think about as a bigger space is to what Commissioner Hughes said, making sure that a community organization that actually is in the community, that's not made up, that just didn't pop up overnight, actually takes over to make sure that that happens. And so that's what I'm asking of the commissioner. But Mr. Blank, I need to can you make plain that you do have an offer for the home, or is that not correct?
Could we pause that question for a minute when we'll ask that question when he has an opportunity to respond. Obviously, there are a lot of proposals or ideas from the commissioners as well as you, Alderwoman, but I want to make sure that he gets an opportunity to speak when everybody has asked the question. So let's pause that for a minute and let me call on Commissioner Cox, who wants to make a statement.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay. So what I want to speak to is the larger issue that Alderman Taylor is raising, and I think it was raised by one of the preservation groups. We don't have a record of the full extent of cultural sites that are tied to African American, Latino, and other experiences. It's we kind of need a cultural survey because I think most of us who have visited sites of memory in the African American experience are always struck by how everyday and ordinary they are. Whether it's Hitsville in Detroit that are two wood frame houses that created the Motown sound, or Dr. King's house in Atlanta. I mean, they are ordinary, everyday experiences. And so I suspect that there are hundreds of sites that have that kind of importance throughout Chicago, and we don't know where they are. And so I would argue that if we were to do a comprehensive survey, and that would be an excellent use of our historic resources in partnership with organizations like the Landmark Illinois and Preservation Chicago, at least when those properties change hands, those owners will know what they're getting. Maybe, again, so that's part of it. And it's one thing to stumble into this. It's another to very intentionally purchase it because you know that it's tied to an important historical event or historical figure. So I would hope that once we get over this house, that the commission, directs the planning department to begin laying out how we more comprehensively document the sites of historic memory in Black and Brown Chicago. And so I certainly think that would help so that we're not, making these designations one at a time as they come to our attention, but we have a handle on this chapter of history, which, as you know, it's really only in the past 50, 60 years that, society has even bothered to acknowledge these sites for their value in American history. So that's the interest that I have.
Thank you. Duly noted, Commissioner Osmond.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize what a couple of commissioners have also said today. I think this is a very historic moment, and I'm totally honored that to be a commissioner at this time. And I echo, though, what Commissioner Tolliver said in terms of, I think this is a longer-term strategy, and we're not here to solve what how we're to handle this home. I would put a note of caution that historic homes all across the country are dying and really having a hard time surviving. So I did like what Commissioner Cox said in terms of looking at this very differently, that there is an income stream that attaches this. So whatever happens in the community, I think we have to make sure that we preserve this for the long haul and understand the economic challenges that historic homes are having in all communities, and also look at the past of historic homes in the city of Chicago with the way, Clark House is really an orphan and not really taken well care of. So I think we just have to put that into context, but I do support this, and I think it's a very exciting and historic moment for the commission.
Thank you. Let me turn to Mr. McCray. Let me say that you probably heard a lot of the questions, whether this should be a museum, give the property. There are so many options here. What we're doing today is providing you with some ideas of what the commission would like to see happening. But this, as Commissioner Tolliver indicated and Commissioner Osmond ratified, this is a long-term plan that we have to develop for the property. The older woman have some questions. Commissioner Hughes have some suggestions. Commissioner Cox have some suggestions. So what we'd like to hear from you is, do you have a plan that at least acknowledges some of the concerns that the commissioners have at this point? And if you have a plan, then we can hear about it. If you don't, that's understandable, because this is just the first step. But I'll give you the microphones for you to speak at this point.
Thank you. Yes, I hear everyone's questions, and I'm very thankful for the concerns. As I think I said earlier, I think the reality was probably 10 days ago that this was going, where the direction of this was going and what was happening. So to live out my first core value of our company is honesty. And the honest answer is no, I don't have a actual plan of what to do with the property. I appreciate Ms. Taylor. I am excited. I think she brings up a great point. Have we considered the family, and are they on board with it? And that's great to hear that the family wants this, right? And then to her question, I have received an offer as of Tuesday night. And as of my response was, I appreciate the offer. Honestly, like I haven't even had a chance to really, dig into the seller the buyer and what they're about. And knowing that we had the meeting today, I'm not rushing into making a decision. I do know that I'm probably, not living in the community and having family in the community. I'm probably not the best representation of making that decision. I think, whether it's a partnership or an organization or is selling to the right people that have a bigger plan and can live that out. When I heard this was happening and understood that this was Emmett's house and the family, I didn't question and hesitate on whether this should be a landmark. I stand behind it full-heartedly. I think it comes in a time in history that couldn't be of bigger importance. And so, but do I have a plan? No, I'm here today to get feedback, understand, and really, I think it's great to get your feedback and concern from Alderman Taylor to, Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Hughes, and the different organizations that have been brought to me. So I'm open and wanting to pursue conversation on what this really should look like.
Okay. Thank you. And that's understandable. I mean, this is a lot of information and a lot of options that you will have in the future. I just ask you to avail yourself of the resources that the Commission on Chicago Landmarks has, as well as the Department of Planning, Preservation Chicago, and other organizations that work with landmarks. Make sure that you avail yourself of those resources so you can proceed to rehab the property or maintain the property in a status that is deserving of landmark status and honor the memory of the Till family. There be no other questions. I would like to request a motion to adopt the Commissioner Burns before I move. Do you have another question?
No, I was just going to move that
Okay.
we adopt this.
All right, so let me read this statement and then I'd like to request a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley House. It has been moved by Commissioner Burns. Do I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tolliver, and then I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
Commissioner Osman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wong?
Yes.
Commissioner Yakovich?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Yes.
And I believe that I called everybody, so I ratify the vote as chairman. So the motion carries, and we look forward to hearing more about what the future of this building is. It's very important, not just because it represents, but also because it reflects on where we are these days in our society. Thank you all. The next item is the preliminary landmark recommendation for the Illinois Bell Building located at 225 West Randall Street, and Daniel Kleiber will make the presentation on behalf of the department.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Leon. I'm here today with a preliminary recommendation for the landmark designation of the Illinois Bell Building located at 225 West Randolph Street. To help orient you, the subject building is located at the southeast corner of West Randolph Street and North Franklin Street in the 42nd Ward and near the center of the Loop community area west of City Hall.
You're breaking up, Daniel.
DPD staff believes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
DPD staff believes that the Illinois Bell Building meets 3 criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criterion 1 for heritage. Constructed in 1966, the Bell Building is a representation of the reinvestment in downtown Chicago, the Loop area in particular, by corporations in the 1960s. In contrast to many other American cities, Chicago saw a significant increase in downtown development by private entities during this time period. In addition, the Illinois Bell Company was a major employer in Chicago and Illinois as a whole. At its zenith in the early 1970s, the company employed roughly 36,000 people in the Chicago area alone and made important contributions to the advancement of technology in the telephone industry. For example, Chicago was one of the first major cities to have telephones just 1 year after Alexander Graham Bell's invention. Moreover, Illinois Bell's research and development arm was critical in developing systems that are still used today, such as call waiting, speed calling, call forwarding, and three-way calling. Staff also believes that the building meets criterion 4 for exemplary architecture. The Illinois Bell Building is one of very few known examples of new formalism as applied to a skyscraper in Chicago. In addition, there are no known Chicago landmarks that exhibit the new formalist style. The marble and granite facade materials are unique and key elements of the new formalist style, which embrace the use of rich building materials as part of the nod to classical architecture. The Illinois Bell Building is distinguished from other new formalist examples by its strong vertical columns, projecting roof slab, and cantilevered first-story colonnade, which creates a street-level plaza. Staff also believes that the building meets criterion 5 for its association with an architect. The building was designed by one of Chicago's oldest and most influential architecture firms, Holabird and Root, previously Holabird and Roche. Under its original partners, William Holabird and Martin Roche, Holabird and Roche was an important architectural firm associated with the development and refinement of the Chicago style, a significant development in the history of world architecture. John Holabird and John Wellborn Root Jr., second-generation partners of Holabird and Roche, and the successor firm of Holabird and Root, are significant for their sophisticated and intricately planned buildings, whether classical revival designs such as the Palmer House or Art Deco skyscrapers such as the Chicago Board of Trade and Palmolive Building. At the time the firm designed the Illinois Bell Building, Holabird and Root was in the process of redefining itself as an innovative powerhouse, a generation after designing some of Chicago's most groundbreaking buildings. In 1974, the firm received Chicago's highest architectural honor for the design of an Illinois Bell Building in Northbrook, Illinois. In addition to the landmark criteria just discussed, staff believes that the building also meets the separate integrity criterion. The building's exterior possesses a significant degree of its historic design integrity. Changes to the Illinois Bell Building are limited. The sky bridges that once connected the building to its neighboring Illinois Bell Building on
Daniel, you froze. Can you hear us? Everybody stand by. We have technical difficulties for a minute.
I can continue the presentation for Dan while he gets reconnected.
Okay, go ahead, Joyce.
I'll start from the beginning of the slide. The building's exterior possesses a significant degree of its historic design integrity. Changes to the Bell Building are limited. The sky bridges that once connected the building to its neighboring Illinois Bell Building on Washington Street on floors 6 through 20 were removed, likely in the 1980s. Similarly, the connecting concourse between the buildings has also been removed. A renovation in 1989 altered the main lobby, lowering the ceilings in some areas and adding wood paneling to some walls. Retail tenant spaces were constructed at the northwest and southwest corners of the lobby, likely at the time of the lobby remodeling in the 1980s. On the office floors, the elevator lobbies on each floor were also modernized in the 1980s with the addition of wood paneling and upholstered wood panels, or wall panels, pardon me. Okay. In conclusion,
Sorry,
okay.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Sorry about that, I was disconnected. In conclusion, based on its preliminary evaluation of the Illinois Bell Building at 225 West Randolph Street, the commission staff recommends that the significant historical and architectural features be identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the building, and the first floor lobby and the surrounding plazas of the building, including the granite planters on the Franklin and Randolph Street elevations as depicted on the graphic in front of you. You have a preliminary landmark recommendation to that effect. Thank you. And as was earlier noted, we have received support letters from Landmarks Illinois and Preservation Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel and Joyce. I like what you guys did here, being prepared in case that we have technical difficulties, which obviously we did. So thank you both. Commissioners, do you have questions for either Daniel or Joyce? Let's see, did anybody raise their hands? No. Okay, Commissioner Hughes.
Yes, can we, I think you said it earlier, but the significance of, or I'm sorry, preserving the first floor, what does that mean for future redevelopment? Is everything maintained? I understand the elevations, but what does it actually mean to preserve the first floor?
Hi, we actually have done this on a few different occasions. We would be preserving the volume of the space itself, the lobby, as I mentioned, and as I also mentioned, the architectural features that are preserved also include the plaza, including some of those granite planters that are indicated on that graphic. Did you hear me?
Yes. Sorry. Thank you, Daniel, for that. Okay, so this is, if they wanted to give it a facelift in the future, for instance, as long as they're maintaining the general volume of the first floor, they can do that.
And I guess I would also ask if Deanna has anything to say about how an individual permit might, be looked at. But essentially, yes.
Okay.
The IBM building, by the way, the IBM building is another one. We have preserved the lobby of that building as well. We preserved the interior, as you might recall, for the Mount Pisgah Missionary Baptist Church landmark relatively recently. So individual permits would be reviewed that would come in. I mean, if they were doing some sort of an electrical, simple type of permit or something, it still would be looked at, but it would be most likely approved routinely. But if they wanted to, put up some whole new wall system on the lobby, that might be something that we would, have a problem with.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
The reason I asked that too, sorry, was because during the presentation there was talk about the ceiling being dropped, and I saw that in here in the packet, and how that works. If they wanted to, for instance, lift the ceiling back up, or if they wanted to take us back in time, I don't know. I was just wondering if it sounds like it'll be case by case, which is my MO. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for Daniel or Joyce before we hear from the owner's representative? Okay, let's hear from Paul Shadle, who represents the owner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Hi, yes, Paul Shadle with the law firm of DLA Piper, and along with my colleague Katie Janke-Dale, we're here on behalf of the applicant, or the owner, sorry. The commission staff should have received consents from the owner. The next item on your agenda will provide more detail on what the contract purchasers proposed redevelopment plans are. You also heard those during the PRC's meeting 2 months ago. But the consent was granted, and as is typically the case with these projects, that is actually facilitating the Class L, which is a linchpin of the redevelopment.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Paul? There being none, I would like to request a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recommendation to City Council for the Illinois building. Do I have a second? Moved by Commissioner Wong. Do I have a second? Do I have a
Seconded.
seconded by Commissioner Osmond? Let me call the other commissioners. Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Yekovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Cox, Commissioner Cox.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tolliver,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
And I, as chairman, ratify the motion and it carries unanimously. Thank you. Let's move to the next line. The next
Mr. Chairman?
item. Yes,
Sorry, it's Paul Shadle. I just wanted to ask one other question.
sure.
And if you want me to defer this until the discussion of the Class L, I can do that. But I just have a procedural question for the commission, and that is that it's my understanding that the normal process would be that, assuming you recommend preliminarily the designation of the building, you would then hear a Department of Planning and Development report at your October meeting and a final recommendation at your November meeting. And I just wanted to respectfully request that, given the market that we're in and the need to keep this project on track in a very difficult capital market, if it were possible to accelerate the designation such that the designation in Class L could proceed to the City Council 30 days sooner, we would very much appreciate that. And I don't mean to throw that up as an obstacle. I just want to throw it out there for the commission's consideration, just given the circumstances we're encountering.
It's not an obstacle, and we just approved the preliminary recommendation. But what I'm going to do, rather than getting into this discussion, is to ask you to consult with Diana, the staff, to see how that could be achieved. We can spend the whole day here trying to figure out how
Understood.
to expedite the process. But it's best if you meet with Diana and the legal department to see whether that's achievable. I don't know at this time whether we can do it or not, but I think that it's best if we ask the staff of the commission to work with you and come up with a resolution to the best possible alternative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Let's move to the recommendation to City Council for approval of the Class L property tax incentive for the same building, the Illinois building located at 225 West Randall Street. And Diana will make the presentation on behalf of the department. Diana.
Thank you, Chairman. 225 West Randolph Owner LLC has submitted an application for the Class L property tax incentive for this property. The Class L applicant has entered into a purchase agreement with the current owners of the property, and the owners have authorized the prospective owner to file this Class L application. As you know, the Class L property tax incentive is a special real estate tax assessment classification adopted by the Cook County to encourage the preservation and rehabilitation of landmark buildings. To qualify for the Class L incentive, the building must be an individually designated City of Chicago landmark or a contributing building in the City of Chicago Landmark District. The owner must invest at least 50% of the building's market value as determined by the assessor in the rehabilitation, and the commission must certify that the rehabilitation meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation of historic buildings, and the Chicago City Council must support granting the incentive. The office building is only partially occupied and is in a deteriorated condition. The proposal is to rehabilitate the property into a Class L office building. The scope of work and proposed plans were reviewed and conditionally approved by the Perma Review Committee on July 9th, 2020. The exterior work includes marble, granite, and curtain wall repairs to address all condition issues. Existing non-historic curtain wall film applied to the interior surface will be replaced, and all facades will be cleaned. Existing metal screens, fencing, and column bases will be repaired. Plaza pavers will be repaired, and existing planters will be modified as conditionally approved by the Perma Review Committee. The interior scope of work includes rehabilitation of the first floor lobby, including replacement of non-historic ceiling, replacement of non-historic wall panels with stone similar to historic finish, as well as construction of a new stair from lobby to the basement. A new entrance will be added at the center bay of the Randolph elevation. On the upper floors, the work will include demolition of interior non-load bearing walls and finishes, renovation of elevator lobbies, common corridors, and bathrooms. The existing core of 17 elevators and 2 stairs will be retained and renovated at all floors. All obsolete mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems will be removed and new code compliant systems installed. The Class L project includes the following sustainable policy improvements: exceed energy code by 5%, indoor water use reduction, proximity to transit, bike parking, and 80% waste diversion. The Class L improvements are estimated to be completed in March of 2024. The minimum investment required for eligibility for the Class L is about $69.5 million. The applicant will be spending almost $123 million in qualifying rehabilitation expenses for the building as part of this project. The total project costs are estimated to be just about $342 million, which does include acquisition costs. A tax analysis has been prepared to estimate the value of the incentive to the applicant. The current annual taxes for the property are $5,926.10. Estimated property taxes over the 12-year period with rehabilitation of the property but no Class L incentive would be about $99 million. And that would be the net present value. Estimated property taxes over the same period of time with the Class L incentive in place are just under $48 million net present value. After the Class L period, annual taxes for the property are estimated to be $16.6 million or $5,726,930 more than if the building were not rehabilitated. The DPD has estimated that the total tax abatement to the applicant over the 12 years of the incentive is about $55 million net present value. Staff recommends approval of the request for the Class L incentive for the project, and a draft recommendation was submitted to you. Representatives of the applicant are here if you have any questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Diana before we ask Paul to talk about the rehab work that is going to take place? I don't see any commissioners raising their hands. So Paul, would you like to make a statement? I'm assuming that you are testifying on behalf of the property owner.
Yes, again, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Thank you for hearing the application today. Again, for the record, I'm Paul Shadle. I'm a lawyer with the firm of DLA Piper, and with my colleague Katie Janke-Dale. I'm here on behalf of the applicant in this matter, which is also the contract purchaser of the property, and that's 225 West Randolph Owner LLC and its members AJ Capital and Ani Group. And with me today are Scott Ebbett from AJ, Brian Brodeur from Ani, who will undertake the development of the project, along with Krista Weir from HPA Architects and our historic consultant, Rob Mawson. I want to thank Diana Cavallo and her team at the Department of Planning and Development and the whole department for shepherding a detailed review of the building's landmark designation, the project plans, and the Class L application, and also Alderman Riley for his support for the project. The Commission's Permit Review Committee, as noted, reviewed and approved the project plans that Diana just summarized, which described the Class L scope of work during the PRC's July 9th, 2020 meeting. And we look forward to working with DPD staff to see this project through to completion of construction. Diana has described the key details of the project and the Class L application to you. So I just want to note one item in particular, and I'm repeating myself a little bit from the last item, but the Class L incentive is an essential component of the feasibility of the proposed rehabilitation, and also is a condition to the purchase of the property. Without the prospect of obtaining the Class L classification upon completion of the scope of work, the developer would be unable to obtain the financing that's necessary to proceed with the purchase of the building and the construction of the project. and also would not have been able to obtain the property seller's consent to the landmark designation. The market for development debt and equity financing for Chicago projects was difficult when we began the Class L application process last year and has only become more difficult since then. So we very much appreciate the availability of the Class L incentive and your consideration of this application. With that, I think Deanna has gone through the plans. As I say, our team is here. I would respectfully ask for your positive recommendation for approval of the Class L, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have about the project.
So I have a couple of questions, Paul. So I'm assuming that the contract is contingent of obtaining the Class L designation, right?
Correct.
And what is the timing for the financing and the construction?
Well, the expectation is that they would close. Part of that is the reason for my question on the last item. The closing, of course, is contingent on the City Council's approval of the Class L, but they would move to close on the transaction as quickly as possible after that. They have soft financing commitments and would firm those up based on that approval and close as soon as possible thereafter and begin construction. We're a little bit sort of behind where we had hoped to be at this point, not because of anybody's fault, but just that. So there's a desire to move forward.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any other questions? Let me look in here. There are no other questions. Thus, I would like to request a motion to approve the recommendation to City Council for the Class L property tax incentive for the Illinois Bell building. Do I have a motion?
Take the motion.
Moved by Commissioner Tolliver, I believe. Do I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Burns. And let me do a roll call. Commissioner Osmond?
I approve.
Commissioner Wong?
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
Commissioner Yekovich?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Yes.
And I affirm the vote as chairman. Thank you. Good luck. And again, Paul, talk to the Department of Planning and Development about the time frame for completing this, the designation.
We will, and thank you again.
Thank you. Before we begin with Agenda 5, I need to announce that I will be recusing myself from both agenda items 5 and 6. I'm on the board of directors of Uptown United, which is a nonprofit entity, and they provided a letter of support for the next two items. Thus, I feel like I need to recuse myself from participating in this discussion because it's approved. It's a recommendation that comes from the nonprofit organization that I'm on the board of directors. With that in mind, I will turn it over to the Vice Chair, Ernie Wong, and I will mute myself.
Barrier for some folks, so finding fun ways to do that.
Thank you, Chairman Leon.
Instagram account.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, there's some background there. Agenda items 5 and 6 will require a separate vote. However, the presentation for these two items will be combined as they're adjacent properties in the Uptown Square District and will be reviewed using the same criteria. So I think Larry Scher is going to
make sure you get the drink too. Thank you so much for sharing, Josephine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
And,
can you guys hear me?
Yes, I'm trying to get somebody to mute there.
It's actually Mr. Shore's background.
Larry?
Yep.
Okay, we all set?
Is there interference? Can you hear me?
There's no more interference. Thank you.
Okay. In March of 2017, the PRC reviewed the proposed demolitions as part of a pre-permit review of a new construction project for the site, which was subsequently approved by the Plan Commission as a planned development. Since 2017, the property has been sold to a new owner, and a new construction project, which is now being modified, will be presented to the PRC at a future meeting. The PRC's recommendations regarding these demolitions are included in your packet, and they namely are the demolition of the non-contributing buildings at 4601-11 North Broadway and 4613-17 North Broadway. And the PRC recommends that the demolition of these buildings would not be an adverse effect on the character of the district. They therefore recommend that the commission recommend to City Council approval of the proposed demolitions of the building in accordance with the relevant code sections. Let's go to the next slide, and this is just to give you a little bit of an orientation to these two buildings. You can see that they're located at the intersection of Wilson and Broadway, and these are just shots as you kind of come from the north and follow around on Wilson, just to show you how they relate to the existing historic development adjacent to those buildings. We also have a couple of slides that show you some of the contributing buildings in that district, just to give you a sense of the sort of the character and quality and craftsmanship of the buildings which are considered historic in that area. I think I have another slide just to be safe. There's some more contributing buildings in the Uptown Square district. The two buildings that we're talking about on the next slide is the one, there we go. The one on the top, 4613 to 4617 North Broadway, that was constructed in 1928, but it was significantly altered in the 1970s, and all the characteristic ornamentation was removed, and it no longer retains sufficient integrity to be considered contributing. The building below, 4601 to 4611, was constructed in 1965, I think circa 1965, and that was outside of the district's period of significance, which is approximately 1900 to 1940. So I don't want to run through all the criteria because the Permit Review Committee has already considered those back in 2017. We are recommending that the commission approve this and find that these buildings, both of them, are non-contributing to the character of the Uptown Square district. 2, find that the proposed demolitions will not be an adverse effect on the significant historic and architectural characteristics of the district. And 3, recommend to the City Council approval of the proposed demolitions of the buildings in accordance with Section 2-120-825 of the Municipal Code of Chicago, entitled Permits for Demolitions of Landmarks, City Council Approval Required. As the chairman mentioned, these are actually 2 separate items on the agenda. So there are 2 separate resolutions, and I believe you will be asked to vote for each of them. That really concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me, I believe representatives of the development team should also be at this meeting if you have any questions for them.
Thank you, Larry. Does the commission have any questions of Larry at this time? And I am Commissioner Hughes.
Hi, thank you. This is just super quick. What is the plans for redevelopment of the site? I'm assuming it's going to be some sort of retail or maybe mixed use. I would be interested in that. If we're removing something, it should be something adequate that's replacing it.
I believe it'll be retail on the first floor and residential above, but I know the applicants can address that much more completely than I can.
Commissioner Cox.
Excuse me. No, it's actually refreshing to see a demolition proposal come to us that involve non-contributing buildings. And I say that only, half jokingly after, being bombarded this week with prospects of demolition of 2 churches. And so finally, someone wants to demolish something that doesn't contribute. But I will say, I guess it's I want to be sure that to Commissioner Hughes's question, there are guidelines in place for this geography that will help guide the prospective redevelopment of the site. I just want to make sure I understand that, because this is, very non-controversial. It's more, the controversy starts when you start putting something back. And I just want to understand if there are guidelines that will dictate that, or is it just going to be whatever they want to put on the site?
Commissioner, there are definitely guidelines for infill development in the historic districts. In those cases, we look to the existing historic buildings to help define the overall heights, massing, materials, fenestration, and overall characteristics of the new construction. So we will be looking, and in fact, in 2017, when the commission reviewed this initially, they looked at those exact things and they did approve a design. As I mentioned, that design has changed substantially from what it was 3 years ago. So we're basically opening up these same issues for another review. At the same time, the guidelines do allow for contemporary design when that design can be clearly related to the historic characteristics of the district.
So if I can just continue on that line of thought, if there was an existing PD on the site that was not realized, so we have what the prior PD allowed. There is a site plan and a massing proposal and a use proposal already.
That's exactly right. And that was included in the commissioner's packets, but it's changed quite a bit, although I believe the overall height and massing are generally comparable to what was approved. And I know the applicants are working to develop a revised design for a future meeting, I believe. Hopefully this will be going to the next permit review committee meeting in October.
Commissioner Cox, I also might want to add that, new developments that occur like this will also go through the community groups. In this case, Uptown United will be reviewing this. And as you just heard, that our chair is sitting on that board. So he will be reviewing this in that capacity as well.
Great. Thank you.
Nobody else has raised their hand for questions for Larry. So then I'd like to call on the owner's representative, Steve Rezabek, if you could make a statement, please.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the commission. As was discussed, there was an existing plan development approved in 2017. And with the new owner now, we have applied for some minor changes to that plan development. We are going to be respecting the zoning envelope, obviously, of what was approved in terms of height and bulk and so forth. But we do have some fenestration changes. We are reducing the number of parking spaces from 44 to 22, so approximately by half. We're directly across the street from the transit station at Broadway and Wilson. And we are also increasing the number of dwelling units from 197 to 200 units. So those really kind of cover the proposed changes that are being pursued.
Mr. Rezabek, if you could, I'm sorry I didn't stop you before, but if you could state who you are and your affiliation, please.
Yes.
Record.
Apologize. Yes, I'm Steve Rezabek, partner at Papa George Hames. We're the architects representing the owner, Uptown 4601 LLC.
Okay, thank you. Does the commission have any questions for Mr. Rezabek at this time? And nobody has raised their hands. Okay, with no other questions, I'd like to state that, again, we will be taking two separate votes, one regarding the permit application for demolition and the second regarding the permit application for the demolition at 4601 and another one for 4613 North Broadway. So I'd like to request a motion for 4601 North Broadway.
So moved.
That was Commissioner Hughes. And a second by Commissioner Burns. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Jekovich.
Yep.
Commissioner Osmond.
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes and Commissioner Cox.
Here, yes.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
And Commissioner Hughes, you move this. I also vote yes. We do have the motion carries unanimously on that item. The second motion that I'd like to request is for the property located at 4613 North Broadway. I'd like to request a motion for that, for the demolition of that property. Commissioner Burns making that motion, and can I get a second? I'm sorry, was that Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll do the roll call again. Commissioner Burns?
Yes.
Commissioner Osmond?
Yes.
Commissioner Jekovich?
Yes.
Commissioner Cox?
Yes.
And I think we got everybody also. I vote yes as well. Commissioner Tolliver, I am so sorry.
Yes.
Okay, now we're unanimous. So that motion is approved as well. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Chairman Leon. Take us away.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chairman. Let's move on to the next item, the Permit Review Committee reports for the project's review at the August 6, 2020 Permit Review Committee meeting. And let me call on you again, Commissioner Wong, for the report.
Thank you, Chairman Leon. The Permit Review Committee reviewed 4 projects at its August 6, 2020 meeting. All 4 projects were approved with conditions. The report summarizing the scope of the proposed projects and the committee's decisions was included in your packets. This report is for your information and for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me call on Larry Shore for the report on the decisions by the commission staff for the month of August. Larry?
So for the month of May, staff reviewed 158 permit applications. 19 of these applications relate to projects which were reviewed by the Permit Review Committee. A total of 178 reviews were performed by staff, and the average number of days to issue the approval or corrections was 4.5 days. And that time, staff also reviewed 15 sign applications.
Thank you, Larry. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Larry? I do have a question. How are you working remotely in terms of reviewing these applications? Has it delayed any processing of applications?
A little bit. I think maybe in the recent months, the volume of permits has lessened slightly. I don't know if that has to do with the current situation or if the change in the weather, but most of us are working from home 4 days out of 5, and we have access to all the same databases and information that we have when we're in the office. So we're trying our best to keep up with things.
Okay, thank you. This is just a question for our own information. Diana, how is the staff? Larry saying that 4 days out of the 5 people are working from home. I'm assuming that you still have the ability to have staff meetings and working to discuss transactions?
That's a very good question, Commissioner. Actually, I think we discuss things more because it is so easy to jump on a virtual meeting, and we do check in on permits actually pretty much daily. So there has been no impact, adverse impact on that issue. So We are maintaining designations as well, as you can see. And we obviously miss being in a team environment, which is the main issue, I think, that we all are seeing.
Well, welcome to the world. I think that everybody who is working remotely is working harder and more hours working from home than if they were going to the office. So thank you for that information. That's it for today. Do I have a motion to adjourn? We don't have any other business.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And we're adjourned. The Permit Review Committee will begin at?
We'll begin at 2:45 prompt.